Inflammation, without doubt, is the leading cause of disease. 9 out of 10 deaths are created from inflammation in the body. And one of the top sources of inflammation is through the foods that we eat. There are 5 inflammatory foods that are really, really troublesome for our body. Our body has a lot of difficulty in processing these foods, and then they go on to create other more sinister things. And I always say, if you get gut issues from eating these foods, you are one of the lucky ones, because there are so many other symptoms that are seemingly unrelated. Anxiety is a really, really big one. Anxiety, joint pain. These are things that myself as a functional medicine practitioner and other practitioners see in their clinic, and they're directly related to the foods that we eat, and then the knock-on effect of what happens to the gut and to the brain and to the joints in the body. The top inflammatory foods, I'm talking about gluten. I'm talking about dairy, and dairy is something that does need to be broken down, but really good fermented quality dairy is different to drinking cow's milk that's been mass commercialized from cows that have been pumped full of antibiotics and hormones their life. So dairy is a topic that we need to break down, but dairy in a whole, I would consider an inflammatory food. We're talking peanuts, highly inflammatory, and a lot of people know this because of the anaphylaxis and the allergic reactions that we have. Corn is highly inflammatory. The majority of corn is genetically modified. So you have to be very, very careful of the corn that you eat and the corn that is in as an ingredient in processed foods. So there's a real difference between corn from an organic grower and corn that has been genetically modified and milled and processed and then stuffed in something in a packet. And soy. Soy is a very cheap food, so it's often used as a filler in processed foods. There's a very big difference between a fermented soy product like a tempeh and other soy flours that are heavily processed and full of chemicals and glyphosates and pesticides. And with gluten, for example, and soy and anything that's made into a flour or put into a grain product, the issue is not only in that product and the body seeing it as something that it can't break down, but also the chemicals that have been put on it. So with gluten, the research is half of it is because the protein in wheat, so in wheat products, so we're talking wheat, spelt, barley, rye. What is happening now is that gluten protein is too big for the body to digest, for the human system to be able to tolerate, but also because it's been covered in chemicals. So we're talking about two things that are creating inflammation in the body. What we know from the scientific research is that gluten damages the intestinal wall of all humans, 100%. It's not often you get a study that shows that definitive statistic, 100%. All humans. One of my beautiful teachers, Dr. Tom O'Brien, when he taught me this, the leading gluten expert in the world, I put my hand up in class and I said, hang on, doesn't that mean that we shouldn't be eating gluten at all? And he looked at me and he said, yes. So, and that's because the intestinal wall, when you give it an assault like the gluten, what happens is it will damage the intestinal wall and the cells might regenerate in a few hours. Or in you, they might regenerate in a few days. In someone else, they might regenerate in a few years. And so you don't know how quickly your cells regenerate from those adulterated foods and from those inflammatory foods. And what happens is a hole is gradually made in the intestinal wall. That creates a situation called leaky gut. You might have heard of that. The hole creates an issue where toxins and other food particles are able to move their way into the bloodstream instead of being contained in the intestinal wall. And the intestine's kind of like one long sausage or donut. So you only want nutrients passing through that wall. You don't want big gaping holes that allow other things to pass through. So even a piece of broccoli is not supposed to be in the bloodstream. It will be deemed foreign by the human body. Your army that's there to defend you will identify that broccoli and create a food sensitivity. And it's not because you were sensitive to broccoli, it's because you had a leaky gut that allowed the broccoli into the bloodstream. So it's a recipe for disaster. And my recommendation is that the wheat products are not in a place where the human body can digest it, because you don't really know what else is going on for you. And I don't pretend this is easy. We live in a gluten-free household. Different people in my house have a different reaction to gluten, but my son has a reaction where his brain gets fried. Like, he turns into a different person. He's like Huddy, someone else Huddy. And this crazy boy goes bananas, and he's aggressive and angry, and it takes about 3 days, and then he's back to being his very, very sweet self again. So it's a stark contrast. And we were one of the lucky ones, I consider. Like, as a baby, I see pictures, and he literally looked like he was 9 months pregnant with a swollen belly. If you saw photos, I didn't even notice it at the time. My sister said to me, "Is something wrong with Huddy's tummy?" And then we went into the investigation, and we removed the gluten from his diet, and then we ran the test, and we found out he was really highly sensitive. So that situation I feel so grateful for. And I think it's so important because of all of the attention issues we're seeing in children, all of the aggressiveness, which, if you go down the conventional path, may be treated with a medication that could just be avoided if we went to the root cause of the problem. So inflammatory foods are a big deal. I've given you the top 5, but really it's up to you to determine what is working for you, what is supportive, and what is not supporting you. And what's not supporting you is not supporting your energy and your vitality and your transformation. A lot of people are carrying a lot of weight unnecessarily because they've got a lot of food sensitivities, and that's happening because they've got a very leaky gut. So if you see, I've run food sensitivity panels, and there might be 65 foods on that panel. That person, if they just remove those foods without healing and sealing their very, very leaky gut, there is absolutely no point, and they're just going to be spinning their wheels. So we heal and seal that gut lining, and then we can find that we can reintroduce those foods without a problem. Keep reaching to feel better, because the world needs you to feel good so you can share that very special gift that only you have. And if you want more, check out my next video here.